Ready to break up with your bullshit? I mean, all those excuses that are keeping you stuck. Because you have one life to live. And if you're not having fun yet, then that's a problem, dude. Welcome to Goals, Grit, and some woo-woo shit. The podcast where you learn about the habits of kicking ass at life. Whether you want to get ripped, get rich, or just get high on life, this is the place to be. Here's your host, best-selling author and feel-good expert, Una Duncan.
Hey, welcome to Goals, Grit, and some woo-woo shit. I'm your host, Una Duncan, and I have a question for you. Do you have an app on your phone right now that will help you track the calories in your food? I do, and we can both thank Lulu Peters for that, or maybe it's blame her. I just learned about the history of the calorie by reading an article by Michelle Stacy in the Smithsonian Magazine. And for the life of me, I couldn't track Michelle down online to interview her here, but I thought this article was so interesting that I wanted to share with you the story of what I learned from her work about the history of the calorie counting, and why we still think of food in terms of numbers instead of, like deliciousness. Spoiler alert, I'm now thinking hard about whether that calorie app serves me, and I'm curious what effect this will have on you. So make sure you reach out and let me know, and definitely send this episode to anyone you know who is currently tracking their calories. Okay, so let me start by taking you back to the United States in 1909. Women couldn't even vote yet. But Lulu Peters has a medical degree, and she's out there running labs, lecturing on public health, and telling everyone how to feed their kids. She was an absolute badass for her era. And as she entered her 40s, she realized that she had gained weight. Tale as old as time. And she decided that her body was, in her words, too solid. I can actually hear my grandmother saying those words right now. Too solid. So what Lulu did, she dropped 70 pounds. According to Lulu, this was her crowning achievement, and it's a bit of a bummer considering that only 5% of medical students at that time were women. Anyway, what she wanted to tell the world about was her weight loss, and specifically the tool that she used, this brand new concept called calories. And it was so new that she had to tell people how to pronounce it, writing the word out phonetically in her seminal 1918 book, Diet and Health with Key to the Calories. This is thought to be the first ever best-selling diet book. And no wonder it was a bestseller, because let me tell you, old Lulu was a snappy writer. She told stories about Mrs. I'm a Gobbler and Mrs. Tiny Weigh a Ton as members of the, are you ready for this? Friendly Fat Fraternity. Like, I'm cringing so hard right now. And in this book, she really hammered home the idea that calories are everything. In the book, she says, hereafter, you are going to eat calories of food. Instead of saying one slice of bread or a piece of pie, you will say 100 calories of bread, 300 calories of pie. And dude, at the time, this was a mind-blowing concept. At this point, food was still mostly thought about in terms of enjoyment or survival. And Lulu just came along and said, nope, food is numbers now. And if you are eating 350 calories of pie, you better know about it. And people were blown away by this new approach to food, and it caught on like wildfire for a couple of reasons. First of all, this was the Industrial Revolution, an era that was fixated on science, rationality, and quantification. People had been studying the calorie, but like as a measure of heat that could be converted to energy. Calories at that time were about machines, and specifically the steam engine and how much coal it would take to create how much power. So it felt very smart and evolved to extend that idea to the human body as a machine that also burns fuel, and therefore, how could we be more efficient with that fuel? The early research on calories was basically, okay, how can we get more work out of these factory workers and peasants with a more efficient fuel system? A leader in this movement was a guy named Atwater, who really nails this scientific man as machine idea by calling food physiological fuel and saying, quote, in our actual practice of eating, we are apt to be influenced too much by taste. We must regulate appetite by reason. And the reason was, how many calories can I get for how little money? There was actually an ad for a beer company published in 1915 that said, pure beer is next to milk as energy builder. And then it went on to say, a glass of milk yields 184 calories, a similar glass of pure beer, 137, and beer doesn't make you bilious. Therefore, beer was the better energetic bang for your buck. Okay, and then comes along Lulu Peters with her 40-something too solid bod, and she starts thinking, if calories in food create energy and mass, what happens if we purposely create a caloric deficit? Hence the 70-pound weight loss and the best-selling book, because aside from it now being the age of reason and quantification, guess what else was happening? It was suddenly really hot to be really skinny. As I said, Lulu's book came out in 1918, right when the ideal body shape was shifting. Previously, it had been all about the Gibson girl. You know, you can picture that super curvy silhouette with the big bustle and the big hat. I love reading books for that time because they'll always describe the main female protagonist like she was plump as a partridge and just as pretty. I'm like, that's a good thing. Having extra body fat at that time was seen as a sign of wealth and femininity and good health, especially for bearing children. Then, at the turn of the 20th century, body fat started to shift and become associated with lower classes, and being lean started to indicate affluence and status. And dude, to be honest, this is a bit of a weird shift, but most historians explain it like this. They say, okay, the new upper middle class created by the Industrial Revolution displayed conspicuous consumption, but also conspicuous waste. And what could be more wasteful than turning away food? I mean, I still kind of don't get it, to be honest. It sounds like a bit of a weak explanation. I don't get how this changed so quickly and so dramatically. But the fact is that the shift was happening. That is indisputable. The Journal of Women's History gathered up letters sent home from the all-women's Smith College. In the late 1800s, they'd write home talking about all the amazing feasts they had. And one girl wrote home saying, she weighs 135 pounds, but it's her ambition to weigh 150. Fast forward to 1924, and there's an article in the Smith College Weekly that warns, if preventative measures against strenuous dieting are not taken soon, Smith College will become notorious not for the sylph-like forms, but for the haggard faces and dull, listless eyes of her students. It was like all of a sudden in the 1920s, women finally took off the corsets and instead adopted a new form of internal torture to control their bodies through dieting. Also around this time, there was another innovation, the bathroom scale, which came on the market in 1913. So before then, you would have no way of knowing what you weigh other than when you go to the doctor's office. Or they actually had something called a penny slot machine at movie theaters or like department stores. So just pause for a second to imagine that being part of your fun night out of the movies with your friends. You pay a little extra to weigh yourself. So now we have the calorie as a way to quantify food, the bathroom scale as a way to quantify yourself, and thin is in. So people started to feel like they had this really clear way to measure their success and their failure and get a sense of control over the process of what we would call dieting. They often called it reducing, or what Lulu Peters, ever the savvy marketer, called Peter-sizing. Okay, and she really was a savvy marketer, especially in her associating thinness with virtue. Right off the top of her book, which you'll remember was published right after World War I, she writes, in wartime, it is a crime to hoard food. Now, fat individuals have always been considered a joke, but you are a joke no longer. Instead of being looked upon with friendly tolerance and amusement, you are now viewed with distrust, suspicion, and even aversion. How dare you hoard fat when our nation needs it? You don't dare to any longer. Harsh, right? And then she suggests, listen to this, that you should round up all your fat friends. What does she call them? The friendly fat fraternity, and have a watch your weight anti-Kaiser class where you get together and you weigh yourselves once a week in order to defeat the Kaiser. So if you were one of my many listeners who got dragged to Weight Watchers meetings when you were like 12, did you have any idea that you were smashing the Kaiser? Now you do. And you know, all that seems kind of funny and quaint, but Lulu Peters linking thinness with morality feels depressingly, gut-wrenchingly familiar. Her newspaper column was literally called "A Disgrace to Be Fat." She explained that being thin was a visible expression of morality, having self-control, being smart, ambitious, and efficient. That's crazy. I've never felt that before. So, here we have the age of reason and science and quantification. We have a sudden fashion to be really thin. We have scales and Lulu telling us to measure our food in calories. So, who needs to enter the chat? Corporations. I mean, this is a fucking goldmine, right? If the public is now believing that you control your calories, you control your life, it's only a matter of time before every food and beverage company under the sun is advertising that their product can neatly fit into this new framework. Calorie counts eventually appeared on every box, can, and bag, promising people that if they just stick to this number or this portion size, then they can reduce their body down to an acceptable size. And now 100 years later, I'm guessing your grocery store, like mine, has all kinds of 100-calorie snack packs, lower-calorie light versions of everything from yogurt to beer, 0-calorie soft drinks, all continuing to sell us this promise that if we can control what we eat, we can control how we feel about ourselves. But wait, how much of this is true? I mean, now that I've brought us up to the present, this is the big question, right? All cringy, historical, and not so historical fat phobia aside, does calorie counting work? Like, is this bullshit or what? I mean, Lulu did drop 70 pounds. This is science. This is the law of thermodynamics. Energy in minus energy out equals changes in fat stores. This is irrefutable. The only way to lose body fat is to be in a caloric deficit. That is true. Sometimes people are like, no, I lost weight on the keto diet. I ate whatever I want. That may be the case, but it worked because you were in a caloric deficit. Sometimes people will say, no, man, I swear I'm in a caloric deficit and I'm not losing weight. They're not in a caloric deficit. Or sometimes people will say, oh, no, it's not calories, it's hormonal weight gain. But to be clear, it's that your hormones have affected the energy balance. For example, if you have hypothyroidism, then your metabolism can slow down so that you burn between 150 and 350 fewer calories a day. Or sometimes people will say, I am only eating like 1,000 calories a day and I'm still gaining weight. So my calories in, calories out is definitely broken. In those cases, it's usually that those people are vastly underestimating their calories. Or maybe they are eating 1,000 calories a day from Monday to Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They're kind of tripling that and it's averaging out to caloric maintenance. Basically, Lulu was right. And that is why our public health organizations have always talked about KICO, or calories in, calories out. So why aren't we all skinny yet? Especially with all of these super helpful low-calorie products now available to us. And like I said, most of us have a handy calorie tracker in our pockets these days. And I'll personally say, like, I've found calorie tracking to be a useful tool every now and then. You know, I'll realize that my ritual heaping spoon of peanut butter after meals was basically adding 50% more calories to my day. That is good data. But here's what else I've learned. Weirdly enough, calorie counting is not the best way to make sure that you're in a calorie deficit. And if you look around, the truth is that generations of people have adopted Peter's idea to count calories, and the public health advice to, well, eat less and exercise more doesn't seem to be working. As you know, the majority of North Americans are now overweight or obese. The large-scale results of this approach have been pretty fucking dismal. So one theory about why that's the case is because all of these low-calorie foods are often highly processed, and it's creating a food culture focusing more on calorie quantity versus nutrient quality. And also, calculating the actual calories in and actual calories out is way more complicated than it seems. First of all, most people don't weigh and measure every single bite they take. And they will way underestimate how many calories they are consuming. Even if they were weighing and measuring absolutely everything, the labels on the food might be inaccurate. In fact, they are allowed to be inaccurate for up to 20%. Restaurant information is often mislabeled by up to 300 calories. And even if you were able to absolutely accurately know exactly how many calories you were consuming, it doesn't count for absorption of calories, which varies wildly, like based on the type of food, our gut bacteria, and the way the food is prepared. Okay, so that's just calories in. For calories out, that's really hard to calculate because it depends on your body size, your hormonal status, your dieting history, your genetic factors, how much you've slept, and how old you are. Finally, there's more and more research suggesting that the math used by the early calorie quantifiers are drastic oversimplifications. For example, in her book, Lulu says, cutting out 1,000 calories a day would equal a reduction of approximately 8 pounds a month or 96 pounds a year. So under that logic, one could continually shrink away to absolutely nothing by simply continuing to cut out 1,000 calories a day. That doesn't work that way. Lulu actually plateaued in her weight loss. Even though it was Lulu's life goal to be 150 pounds, she never got there. And she lived on 1,200 calories a day. And by God, I believe that woman probably gave it her all. And she never succeeded in busting that plateau. Reducing her calories was just not working anymore. Because the truth is, we aren't just calorie burning machines. We are vastly more complex. And I mean, this isn't even touching all the psychological factors which influence calories in and calories out. Physiologically, there are so many factors that determine whether our calories are stored as fat or burned for energy or used to build tissue and muscle. And despite all this new information, the impulse to quantify everything and treat ourselves like machines is, I think, more prevalent today than it ever was. People track their sleep, the calories burned during their workout, not only their calories consumed, but their macros and even getting down to the net carbohydrates. And I just don't think it's working for us. It's not working for us to get the physical results we want. And I know it is not working psychologically. Here's the last line of Lulu Peters' 1918 book. She says, "Do you want to reduce? Foolish question number 13,579. Why you want to reduce more than you want anything on the face of the globe or the feet of the gods. Tomorrow's the day. And it's, so simple." I think that getting fit is often so simple, but it's not about doing math. In my program, we don't have the calories listed on our meal plans, and sometimes people freaking hate that. They want to make sure they're not getting slipped extra calories like their drink is getting roofied, because sometimes they do want to lose weight more than anything on the face of the earth or the feet of the gods. And I get that. And I'm not being cagey by excluding the information. I'm trying to change the subject towards behaviors that will actually create a sustainable caloric deficit in a much healthier way. Stuff like eating shit tons of vegetables, not eating unless you're actually hungry, laying off the booze, managing your stress. And I get that is fucking boring and it is low tech and it actually works way better than calorie counting. And I just know that for myself, I just feel like it's a healthier choice to live in a mental landscape where I have a slice of pie instead of 300 calories of pie. But as always, I want to know what you think. And listen, if you know anyone who's currently tracking their calories, that's awesome that they're collecting the data. Like I said, that peanut butter thing, it was an eye-opener for me. But will you do me a favor and send them this podcast so that they can add it to their research? Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next week.
Hey dude, thanks for listening. If you like this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you can get the next one. And by the way, if you rate and review this podcast, it really helps me get found by other people who need some goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. And be sure to connect and DM me at Una Duncan on Instagram and let me know what you thought of the episode. Chat soon.